This is Tony Benn, and I'm talking from my flat in London. The European Union is really a political attempt by France and Germany to build a single state in Europe, dominated by the major European countries, and to make laws which will apply everywhere. And although one can understand, and I always have understood, the desire to cooperate with Europe, I don't want the laws I have to obey to be made by people I didn't elect, cannot remove, and who therefore do not have to listen to me. What Cameron says is that he thinks that there should be a transfer of certain powers back from Europe to Britain. He will try and negotiate that with the Europeans, and when he knows how far he's got, he claims he will give us the right to say yes or no to it. And if we say no, we will leave. If we say yes, then we'll have to go along with it. And it's a very hairy business from Cameron's point of view, because he is in favour of our staying in, and a lot of Conservatives are against. And so the proposal for a referendum is really an attempt to buy off the opposition in his own party to the European venture. I'm a Democrat, and for me, I think the most important thing is who governs a country. And we have struggled over many centuries to get the right for all men and all women to vote, and candidates are chosen from the districts which they wish to represent. They have first of all to be selected as the candidates, then they become members of the party of which they are members but have to be accepted as candidates. Then the election comes, and then the outcome determines what the laws are going to be afterwards. If you lose that to a European system, you will find that all the people in Europe who have power have been appointed, not elected, and therefore you will lose the control of your own government. You will give up your democracy. The most vivid example of that being what's happening in Greece now, where the European leading powers are forcing Greece to make massive cuts with massive unemployment. And the Greeks have got no political remedy. So it's very much a turning point for Europe, which way it goes forward. It could go forward by cooperating, but it wants to go forward in a way that would be undemocratic and centralized and in line with the forces of capital. Cuts that have been made by the government have been very severe cuts in pensions, in jobs, in all sorts of ways that have impoverished working people. And it did lead to protests, and protests are all right, but then it led to riots and the destruction of property, and very severe sentences were given by the courts. And I don't think Britain is in a revolutionary mood in the sense that they want to see the world change by force. On the other hand, I think the government is very, very unpopular. I went into Parliament in 1950 when I was 25. We were then in the process of building up after the war, and what the government did was, at that time, the post-war government, to say we will apply the same seriousness to meeting the needs of peace that we've done to meet the needs of war. And we planned the economy, built houses, and so on and so on. And then there was a swing against that. And now we all live in a world dominated by people we don't elect. Multinational corporations and big companies and so on have enormous power over governments. And so we're back now, I think, to a situation where people are saying we don't govern our country again, and we want to. And that's what the Arab Spring has been about in its own way in the Middle East. That's what I think is slowly emerging. I think we are in a state where more and more people are thinking this out for themselves. And they say, why is it that the bankers have such power over us? We didn't elect the bankers. We can't remove the bankers. The bankers don't have to listen to us. And so I think we are moving towards a change. But quite what form the change will take, I don't know. But if it builds an internationalism of meeting the world's needs, then that would be a good thing. If it were to lead to a military dictatorship from the top telling us what we've got to do, then of course it would be a very bad thing. And I'm pretty confident that when the choice comes, people will go for the right choice and say what we want is international cooperation for peace and justice and jobs, and we've got to find a way of doing it. I think industrial capitalism is very well established But I don't think market forces where wealthy people own the wealth of the world and then decide how it's to be spent in their own interests. I don't think that is a long-term viable proposition. I think that will cause endless trouble. And when governments realize they're in trouble if they pursue that policy, then they will tend to try and move to a more responsive way, and I think that's how progress will come. I'm not one of those who believes that whatever we do, it'll all come out all right in the end, because I don't believe that. But I believe our own history and the history of every country proves that if you campaign for justice and you really mean it, you can win. But that requires the hope that you can win. So in that sense, I do believe that if we campaign for what we want, we have a good chance of succeeding. And that hope we must cling on to, because if you give that hope up, then of course things can move in a very dangerous direction towards nationalism and fascism and all the things we've seen in the world in recent years. We have a phrase in our political history: educate, agitate, organize. Saying the first thing we have to do if you want support for a change is to explain what's actually happening. And the Occupy movement is part of that. Then you have to agitate. You have to take injustices and highlight them and campaign strongly against them. And then organize. You've got to think what the future holds after this period. And those are the functions that fall to be discharged by political parties in America, here, everywhere in the world.
Are you happy with how you've spent your life?
Well, I've lived a very interesting life. I was born in 1925. I remember the 1930s very vividly, the Spanish Civil War, the rise of Hitler. I met Mr. Gandhi in 1931 when I was 6, and I sat on the floor next to him, and he said some very interesting things, not one of which I remember, but I was impressed by the power of the man. And we've been through a most bloody war. And now I think the circumstances are being rethought again, and I do have confidence in people's capacity to understand what's happening. The main thing is to encourage them. I think encouragement is the most important function political leaders can give to their people, because I've had a lot of encouragement in my life, and I think my job is to encourage other people to believe we can do things better, give them confidence in the future, because confidence is the greatest safeguard against danger.